All right, let's talk about a tool that is seriously changing the game for how developers write software. It's called Claude Code. And in this explainer, we're not just going to cover what it is, we're going to break down how it actually thinks and how you can team up with it to become a way more effective engineer.
You know, it all kicks off with a story. That quote? It's from Cal, one of the main contributors to Claude Code. He talks about downloading the tool on a Friday night just to mess around with a personal project. And he got so hooked, so completely captivated watching this powerful application practically build itself that he spent his entire weekend glued to his laptop. For him, that one experience totally rewired his whole approach to programming.
So what is this thing that can have such a huge impact? Well, the best way to think about Claude Code isn't as just another autocomplete or some simple code generator. Nope, it's way more than that. It's like having a whole new kind of coding partner.
Here's the core idea. Imagine that super sharp senior engineer on your team. You know the one, right? The person who lives in the command line and can pull off these complex Git commands without even breaking a sweat. Claude Code is basically like having that person sitting right next to you, ready to help 24/7. It's a terminal expert, and it's all yours.
But see, to really work with it effectively, you've got to understand how it thinks. And its approach is really fundamentally different from a lot of the other AI tools you might have used before. To really get what makes Claude Code special, you have to look at how it processes information. A year ago, your typical AI would index a whole codebase and use a technique called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, to pull files from a static database. Claude Code doesn't do that. Instead of just passively searching some index, it actively explores the code, pretty much the same way a human would.
It uses this process called agentic search, so it'll start by searching with tools you already know, like grep. Then, it actually analyzes those results, thinks about what it found, and refines its search to dig even deeper. It's this constant loop of exploring and learning that lets it build a mental map of your project, completely on the fly.
Okay, so now that we get how it thinks, what can we actually do with it? Well, this unique approach translates into a super powerful toolkit for all those everyday developer tasks.
We've all been there, right? Day one on a new team, you're staring at this massive, totally unfamiliar code base, just trying to figure out where to even begin. With Claude Code, you can just supercharge that whole onboarding process. You can ask it straight up, hey, where is the authentication logic implemented? Or even, can you give me a summary of this file's Git history so I can see how it's evolved? It just dramatically cuts down the time it takes to get up to speed and start being productive.
All right, what about something a little more creative? Let's say you've got a ticket to build a brand new feature from scratch. Where do you even start?
This is where you can use it as a strategic thought partner. So before you write a single line of code, ask Claude to search the codebase and come up with 2 or 3 different implementation plans. You can actually discuss the pros and cons with it, tweak the approach, and then get into the coding.
I mean, the uses for this are just incredibly broad. It's awesome for that initial project discovery, for building new features inside existing code, and even for writing things like commit messages and deployment scripts. We're even seeing teams use it to tackle these huge, complex projects, like massive code-based migrations that they've been putting off for years.
And here's the kicker. Because it's an expert at the terminal, it's also an expert at all the command line tools you rely on every single day. You get stuck in some crazy complex Git rebase? Just fire up Claude Code, explain what's going on, and ask it to fix it for you. It's honestly incredible.
So using the tool is one thing, but really mastering it, that's another. Let's go over a few best practices that'll really take your workflow to the next level.
Okay, the single most important thing you can do is use a file called claude.md. Just think of this as the agent's long-term memory. You pop this file into your project, and inside it, you can give it critical instructions. How to run your test suite, where different modules are, what your team's style guide looks like. Every single time Claude starts, it reads this file first to get its bearings.
Now, if you're in a long coding session, you can sometimes fill up the model's context window. To handle this, you've got 2 key commands. /clear gives you a totally fresh start, but the real pro move is /compact. This tells Claude to intelligently summarize your entire conversation, and then it starts a new session with that summary, so you can keep going without losing your train of thought.
It can be really tempting to just let Claude go wild on a big task, but a much better approach is something people are calling smart vibe coding. Basically, it just means guiding it to work iteratively. Have it make one small change, run the tests, check the linter, and then commit.
That tight feedback loop is what keeps the agent on track and gets you much more reliable results.
And for the real power users out there, the workflow gets even crazier. We're seeing developers run up to 4 instances of Claude Code at the same time, basically orchestrating them like a tiny team to tackle different parts of a problem in parallel. It's like having your own miniature AI dev squad on command.
You know, all these techniques really point to a fascinating new future for software development. We're moving beyond just simple assistance to something way more powerful: headless automation.
The next big frontier is what's being called headless automation. This means using Claude Code programmatically with no human in the loop at all. Just imagine embedding its abilities right into your CI/CD pipeline to automatically fix failing tests or suggest code improvements inside of pull requests.
So this all brings us to the big question at the end of the day. This tool isn't about replacing developers, it's about augmenting them. It's about giving them a partner that's always on, always an expert. And it really makes you wonder, what becomes possible? What will you build when you never have to code alone again?